What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So I think he's referred to as a beat reporter, but nonetheless, one of my favorite guys that covers the New York Jets, Antwan Staley. He dropped the 7th-round New York Jets mock draft. One of the first full drafts that we're getting, right? So I wanted to dive into it, kind of see what his thoughts were and how he thinks the New York Jets should attack this, since this seems like more of a what he would do kind of mock draft situation, right? Not necessarily what the team may actually go about doing, but what kind of makes sense, right, for team needs, etc., etc. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So with our first pick, round 1, 10th overall, he has a selecting Penn State left tackle Olu Fashanu. So he mentions, after shoring up the offensive line, many Jets fans might want a receiver or the team to select Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. However, the Jets should continue to add depth to their offensive line, which is why selecting Fashanu makes a lot of sense. Smith hasn't played 16 games in the season since 2015. He has also missed 17 games during the last 2 years. Fashanu would give you a safety net at tackle should either Smith or Moses go down with injury. He is a plug-and-play tackle who has the potential to play at either the right or left tackle positions. Also, Fashanu could potentially be the heir apparent at left tackle, with Smith only signing a 1-year deal last month. With Aaron Rodgers at 40, coming back from the season-ending Achilles tear, the Jets cannot afford to totally rely on Smith and Moses, who are both 33 years old. I've said this quite a bit, and I'm still of that thought, right? The New York Jets have the potential by the time the draft is over, if they double dip, right? Let's just say a tackle and guard, as I think a lot of us would expect. The Jets could walk away with, on paper, one of the best starting offensive lines in the NFL, right? Assuming we can get these guys healthy for the majority of the year. They could also walk away having one of the best second-tier offensive line groups, right? When you want to talk about second and third string players in the NFL. Imagine, you're taking a look at your backups and you have a Olu Fashanu, you have a Wes Schweitzer, you have a Max Mitchell or Carter Warren, depending on how you feel about that. You have an Xavier Newman per se, right? A lot of these guys aren't household names, but we've seen them put up some productive performances for us, and hopefully with the healthy offseason work, all that stuff is normal. You'd hope there'd be some additional development there. But I feel really good that tackle should be the move. You have a elite mentor and player in Tyron Smith. You need to take advantage of that, right? This is the thing that the Jets haven't been able to do for a decade plus now, where you have a excellent elite starter at that position, and as their career is waning down, you have the next man up in the pipeline, and you already feel really, really good about them, right? I think Olu Fashanu out the gate, regardless of how people feel about his run ability, is a guy that is a immediate starter on the blind side when it just comes to pure pass protection, and he's going to have that entire offseason mini camp, OTAs, etc., and Aaron Rodgers in his ear to really help drill things down. Taking a look in round 3, we didn't have any trades or anything, so this was our next pick. Round 3, 72nd overall, we have Florida wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. Let's go ahead and dive into the description here. So, unfortunately, the Jets do not have a second-round pick. The good news is the receiver class in this year's draft is very deep, and Florida's Ricky Pearsall is among the talented players in that group. Pearsall is a reliable slot receiver who at 6'1", 190 pounds, has the size and hands to succeed at the NFL level. He also has the superb speed and is an intelligent route runner. In 12 games for the Gators, Pearsall registered 65 catches for 965 yards and 4 touchdowns last season. Imagine Pearsall in the slot with Garrett Wilson and Williams on the outside. That could be a nightmare for opposing defenses, especially with Breece Hall in the backfield. The argument that I've made to a lot of people when it comes to why aren't you going Rome Odunze or, God forbid, a Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison somehow lands at 10. Realistically, if you get a Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, you take them, right? But it's for the reason that Antwan Staley and plenty of others have mentioned. This class is so deep, and so it's not a guarantee that means that you hit in the later rounds for sure. But the offset between getting a tackle in round 3 and getting a wide receiver in round 3, and those talent levels and what that'll mean for the team building, as well as productivity right out of the gate, I think is vastly different, right? You have a plug-and-play starting guy that is almost guaranteed to need to see the field for some level of significant snaps due to Tyron Smith's injury history. Also won't know if Morgan Moses has any complications with that surgery to the shoulder that he's coming back from. And then AVT isn't going to be the most reliable guy coming back from his 2 season-ending injuries, right? So it makes a ton of sense to try to find a immediate starter there that doesn't have to start. At the wide receiver position, you're not looking for wide receiver 1. Also, excuse me, if you want to take a look at the pecking order, you're talking about Garrett Wilson, undisputed wide receiver 1, Breece Hall having a more definitive role in the passing game, ideally. Tyler Conklin's going to eat a pretty significant amount of snaps after averaging over 55 catches since he's joined the New York Jets, I believe, and about 600 yards. And then now you have Mike Williams inserted in as well, right? So you're talking about a guy that potentially at best is maybe the 4th to 5th option in this New York Jets passing attack. He's obviously going to need to be somebody we hope is more ready to start than not. It's not too hard to say you can upgrade from Xavier Gibson in the slot right now, but it doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. So you get a guy that has an excellent skill set in Ricky Pearsall, right? He was one of the better route runners that we've seen through Shrine Senior Bowl. And then, of course, what he showed during his performances in the Combine. I think he'd be an excellent player to fit in here, especially since the easier upgrade to account for would be the slot position. And this also gives you the opportunity to still see if an Irvin Charles or Jason Brownlee can break out for you as well. Taking a look at our 4th round pick, 111, Wake Forest safety Malik Mustafa. So the Jets' 2 projected starting safeties are Chuck Clark and Tony Adams. Clark is coming off an ACL tear, and Adams is entering his 2nd year of starting experience. That's why a guy like Malik Mustafa would be beneficial to the Jets' secondary depth. Excuse me. He was a 2-year starter at Wake Forest. Mustafa is also a sound tackler who has coverage skills and can provide support in run defense, an area the Jets struggled in last year. Some draft experts have questioned Mustafa's size at 5'10", 209 pounds. However, he's built a lot like Jordan Whitehead, the Jets starting safety for the last 2 seasons before signing with the Buccaneers this offseason. So, not as familiar with Mustafa's game as some of the other safeties that are potentially going to go in day 3. Just hasn't been a huge priority, but understand there is every chance that we can go out there and draft a safety. I was trying to think about it the other day when I was thinking about if we're going to drop a mock draft soon or not. And I can't recall specifically the New York Jets drafting a safety during Joe Douglas's tenure that has remained a safety, right? We're not talking about, the Jamie and Sherwood project converting to linebacker or any of that. And I'm trying to recall, I think Ashton Davis was part of the Mekhi Becton class, so that would be 1 safety in about 4 or 5 years that Joe Douglas has realistically drafted that has stayed on the roster, right? Tony Adams, a UDFA, so he doesn't count. And then, everybody else was pretty much signed to be a free agency or they're holdovers from previous regimes. So it's not high on the list, right? I think this will be a priority in this particular draft class just because a lot of guys are going to get pushed down, and you're talking about the top safety maybe being a late round 1 to early mid round 2 type selection. This would be the perfect opportunity for the New York Jets to go out there. 2 ideally solidified candidates in Chuck Clark, Tony Adams. You have Jerick Bernard Converse right now, who didn't really get to see a ton of time last year with some injury. And then you can find a role to replace that Ashton Davis has vacated at least at this point in time until we return, right? So If you want to go for any particular skill set, I think it does make sense to go out there and try to find somebody that is more keen to give us some solid production in the run game. Short tackler, a guy that can cover open field in terms of not allowing big plays, right? Or you go the opposite end and you try to find maybe an underrated free safety type. But I think strong safety is the easier position for you to generally be able to find a talent, right? That's why people usually jump at the free safety skill set so easily. Also, keep in mind there's still quite a bit of time through the draft. We may just be hedging our bet, but there's still a lot of great safeties out there as well. So don't be surprised if we don't necessarily draft there, but I do think it's a position where we can take advantage of. Our next fourth round draft pick, and one that I think a lot of people would love to see at 134th overall, this coming from the Ravens after the swap, Florida State quarterback Jordan Travis. The Jets could use another quarterback on their roster. Rodgers is coming off a major injury, and Taylor has suffered several during his career. That's why the Jets select Jordan Travis on day 3 of the draft. He was on his way to leading Florida State to the college football playoff before suffering a season-ending injury during a game against North Alabama on November 18th. In 2023, we've seen Travis pass for 2,756 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions, while also rushing 7 touchdowns. Winning ACC Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year honors, Travis is expected to be fully cleared for spring workouts in May, according to reports. Jordan Travis was a guy that, to sum up his impact in the college game in 2023, I heard somebody else highlight this as well. You keep in mind, they looked like they were going to be guaranteed a college playoff spot. Once Jordan Travis went down, the question marks were so obvious to those in authority to decide who was going to make the cut that they didn't think that team had anything close to the same opportunities they would have had with Jordan Travis on the field. I also have heard various other people mention that when you hear the coaching staff, players in the weight room, obviously his own teammates, guys have that, I don't want to say envy, but there's such a respect level in terms of the type of leader he is and what they would be willing to do, or I guess I should say the lack of things they won't do to ensure that their quarterback could succeed. So having a guy like Jordan Travis, the biggest highlight and attraction here obviously is that he doesn't have to come in and start right away. This is a guy that I've heard various other comparisons to, but in general, a nice big arm, right? Kind of has a little bit of rocket power there. It's not going to be a top 10 arm or anything in the league, but this is a guy that you feel like if he can work through a couple nuances early on, which this would give him the advantage for, he can hit the ground running. And I know that's a little funny to say considering you're talking about him not playing for a year or two in an ideal situation, but I think that's what's best not only for this coaching staff, but also for Jordan Travis, where we've had problems trying to develop these guys for quite some time. So I think this will be one of the best situations. By the time he's starting, you're getting a veteran Garrett Wilson. Ideally, you've retained a Breece Hall. You have an offensive line that ideally should be set up with ample resources by then. And then a defense that, by all accounts, will still be above average to elite based on what we've seen. Round 6 for the New York Jets. We don't have a 5th round selection. 185th overall, Iowa tight end Eric All. If the Jets don't draft Bowers in the 1st round, they can land a gem like All later on. Last October, All tore his ACL and missed the rest of the season. When he was healthy before transferring from Michigan to Iowa, All showed all the tools to succeed at the next level. All size and speed at 6'4", 252 pounds, along with his athleticism, could pose problem for defenders. His run blocking does need to improve, but All could eventually develop into another offensive weapon for the Jets. I think it kind of speaks for itself when you see certain college programs that crank out certain individuals, or I should say consistently crank out individuals at certain positions so well. Iowa does really good, I feel like, with offensive line and tight ends, right? And especially since a lot of these guys tend to be underrated or they're coming off an injury or something major that can ding their draft stock. This just speaks to trying to create a pipeline to me. Tyler Conklin is a guy that you could potentially move on from by the time it's all said and done next year, leading to Jeremy Ruckert being your tight end one. If not, and you bring him back, you still have a great duo there, but then you want to make sure you can start developing the guys that are going to replace your Kenny Yeboah types, your Zach Kuntzes if he doesn't develop as your core special teamer that maybe offers some plus ability. Now, with Eric, I will say it's a little bit surprising he's not more of a he's not one of the better run blocking tight ends in this particular class, as that seems to be a premium for those kind of guys coming out of that program. But at the end of the day, it's another fun chess piece for Ron Middleton to see if he can work some magic with. I'm not really mad at it. When you start talking about these day 3 picks, you're really trying to see if you find any elite traits or characteristics about that individual or a special skill set that you can really work with and develop around. Round 7, 256th overall. This is one of our comp picks. Houston defensive end Nelson Caesar. We all know the Jets will select a pass rusher at some point. Caesar could be that player late in the draft. A 2-year starter for the Cougars, Caesar had his best season in 2023. He finished with 43 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. Caesar has the potential to be a decent backup in the NFL or a player who excels on special teams. He's not a bad value pick late in the draft. I personally think, and it just seemed like it's too likely not to happen. I think we end up going edge maybe sooner than people expect, right? Instead of the Mustafa pick with the safety in the 4th, I can easily see that potentially being an edge rusher as well. Somebody like the name's not Greenwood, the Colorado edge rusher, if he still happens to be on the board, for example. Or a defensive tackle, also going to be a huge need for us as we try to, rebuild the cupboards there in terms of significant depth. But he's right. I think at some point you see a edge prospect. Robert Saleh wants to ensure that he feels confident about any 10 guys that he's going to try to put on the field at any particular time. You talk about on the offensive line that's already considering having 10 guys there as well. So you're talking about almost 50% of your roster being eaten up just between the offensive and defensive lines, right? Feels like a luxury pick, something that I would kind of hate, right? If we are going to go edge, at least get a guy that can probably crack the rotation right out of the gate. Caesar screams to me like a guy that's going to end up on the practice squad that will try to stash and ultimately develop. Although we know that Joe Douglas also has a propensity for trying to keep his year 1 guys on the roster. I remember when I highlighted, I think Zach Kuntz is going to get cut. He doesn't have the skill set day 1 to really stay on this roster and help out this team in a positive way. A lot of people laughed at me, and then it happened. I was surprised that we got a chance to really sneak him onto the practice squad, though, which I think does scream volumes about how the rest of the league seen him as well, because if you get a guy that's that ridiculously athletic, you'd imagine somebody's going to try to scoop him up. Nonetheless, though, we have our final compensatory pick in the 7th round, 257 overall, Mr. Irrelevant, Florida center Kingsley Iguakun. The Jets could use a backup center, and Kingsley could be an excellent development player with the final pick. Iguakun was a 3-year starter for the Gators until a nagging right ankle injury limited to 4 games last year. His strength has been questioned, but at 6'3", 304 pounds, Iguakun has quickness and the hands to be a decent backup in the league. Originally looking at this pick and thinking about it, it almost reminds me of like having a fullback on the roster and then going out and drafting another one anyways. It just feels like this is a route that you can go with this being a priority free agent. Not saying center isn't important by any means, but when you take a look at what the Jets have, we know Robert Saleh has stressed that he likes 3 guys just in case of injury that can at least snap the ball effectively. You already have your rookie of the future, right, Joe Tippmann. But then you have Wes Schweitzer, who's played snaps at center. You have Xavier Newman, who the coaching staff highlighted and felt really good about before injury struck them as well. So you don't necessarily need one. I think it would be more prudent, if anything, to go and grab another guard that you feel good being able to convert into a center at certain points, as essentially that emergency center option, break the glass type player. And honestly, it's going to be a little bit more valuable to the team makeup overall. So I won't knock it. I don't necessarily love it. Very few of us are going to love the day 3 picks that come in anyways. Rather, we felt like there was better value elsewhere, or just because, to be honest, we're not pro scouts at all of this stuff. So there's not a ton of us that really care about the day 3 guys until we see them show out on the field, and then we start looking into them, right? So overall, you take a look at this draft class. You have you have a left tackle in the first round. You have a new starting wide receiver in Ricky Pearsall. Then you go and grab yourself a safety for much needed depth there. You grab yourself a quarterback of the future, potentially in Jordan Travis, a developmental tight end, a developmental edge rusher, and then a center potentially that you really only expect to maybe be a swing option at some point for you. I'm not really mad at the class whatsoever. I think, if anything, you double down and maybe try to find another wide receiver as a boundary option for you to compete with Irvin Charles and Jason Brownlee, or you go and you try to target yourself a right guard at some point. Malik Mustafa, again, being one of those prime candidates I can easily see being swapped out with the defensive tackle, an edge rusher, or ideally a guard in that spot. I think you try to go offensive line, wide receiver, offensive line, or O-line, wide receiver, ideally for this draft. But the logic is sound, is reasonable, as you can expect from Antwan Staley here. So overall, it's much longer than I expected this to go. But let me know what you guys think about this particular draft class. Are there value picks that you see here? Do you guys have a preference with what may have been here? The thing we don't know is who was available on the board and stuff at the time this was done. But nonetheless, at face value, it looks like a solid class. Keep in mind, try to avoid the recency bias enough of that 2022 draft class, where you're talking about us potentially having, 4 Pro Bowl, all pro caliber type guys, considering that's the, Sauce Gardner draft class. Overall, this is about us making sure that we can keep the future bright, right? These are going to be guys, especially these day 3 picks, that you hope are going to be the foundation of the nucleus, I would say, of your, future teams once Aaron Rodgers is gone and once we're relying on a guy like Jordan Travis in this particular case. So nonetheless, let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you again. Peace.